My clock reads just a couple of minutes before 4 p.m. on October 28th here in San Juan and in Puerto Rico. My name is Sam Tallman. I'm co-founder here at the Puerto Rico Energy Forum, and we are getting back on track. We had our annual event in September for Puerto Rico Clean Energy Week, where we had 2 days of deep discussion about really a number of different angles to understand the energy sector on the island. And we're going to unpack some of them with our guest, Rodrigo Zavala, today, as well as get into a number of the other activities that the Puerto Rico Chamber of Commerce and others are doing here in Puerto Rico. So without further ado, Rodrigo, welcome to the Puerto Rico Energy Forum.
Oh, thank you, Sam, for having me here. It's a pleasure. And really looking forward to our conversation today.
The way we opened our event in September was my opening remarks focused on the state of energy in Puerto Rico, sort of a State of the Union address, if you will, on where are we, what are the challenges we face, and what are some of the strategies we can deploy to overcome those challenges. From your perspective, Rodrigo, what is the state of energy in Puerto Rico?
We have a very ancient system that has been under-maintained and has been hit by 2 hurricanes and an earthquake, to say the least. And we had the opportunity to use federal money that was allocated to Puerto Rico to reconstruct, but unfortunately, that execution, and execution being the big word of Puerto Rico, hasn't been where it needs to be. So we are not, we haven't rebuilt what was need to be rebuilt. But also, we need to put more money on our transmission and distribution to catch up. But there's light at the end of the tunnel if we replace that aged and under-maintained generation system with a new one. So the thing is, again, execution. We need better execution to replace the existing system that has an efficiency that is far from the current, and that's the opportunity that will allow us to reduce the generation cost and put some money on the transmission and distribution that needs to cope with the volatile renewables that have been fortunate for many individuals and many commerces in Puerto Rico has been implemented and is helping them to have cheaper and more reliable electricity. But it's putting some friction, it's putting some tension on the T&D system that it was not designed and it's not prepared to cope with more than 1.5 gigawatts now of renewable solar.
So if we think about the last decade in Puerto Rico, so it's October, almost November of 2025. Let's think about 2014. The Act 57 was passed. Energy Transformation Act was implemented. The nominal legislative transition to renewable energy, we can call it legislative because many of the initiatives that were proposed have either not come to fruition, have gotten started or failed, or, you mentioned AES. Part of the legislation was to phase out AES by the end of 2027. That has now been rolled back so that they're legally able to operate until 2032. The creation of the Independent Energy Bureau, which has energy regulator, which has come under significant threats recently. The effort to privatize at least the operation of the systems through a gridco in Luma and a genco in Genera are facing massive pushbacks. Some of the government agencies seem myopic in their intent on canceling Luma's contract and replacing them with either an alternative or going back to a public managed utility. When we think about the last decade, Puerto Rico's announced a lot of plans, a lot of reforms, and as you said, the key word is execution. What has changed for businesses in Puerto Rico?
Well, what have changed in this last year is more stability, more uncertainty, and higher cost. That's unfortunately what had happened to the businesses in Puerto Rico. I mean, those that were able or are able are switching to having their own energy, being cogeneration, CHP, solar with batteries. That's how they have defended, or with a generator to just pass the moment, or where you have more blackouts or more moments without electricity. I mean, we have more events and longer duration. That's what had happened over the last decade. More events of electricity interruption with longer duration, and that caused that the businesses needed to find their own solutions, and either they close because they couldn't, or they are finding their own solutions.
What is, from the chamber's perspective, what is the real economic cost of that unreliability?
We don't have a calculation of the real cost. No, on one hand, we know that the most expensive energy or the most expensive electricity is the one that we don't have. I mean, if we don't have electricity, either we need to close our businesses or we need to find run-on generators that are absolutely expensive. So, but I don't have an study that can objectively tell this is the cost of the deterioration that we have seen over the last 10 years.
So I fundamentally agree. The most expensive power is the power we don't have, and I, in those opening remarks, made the comment that I think we're okay with, most businesses and individuals are going to be okay with two of the three in terms of high cost or cost, reliability, and duration, right? Or frequency and duration, right? So if we have high cost but high quality, we're okay with the high cost. If we have low cost and low quality, we're okay finding us an alternative. But if we have high cost and low quality, it feels like an insult to injury. And this feeds into one of the key Gordian knots associated with the power system in Puerto Rico, which is the rates have to go up, in part because utility collections don't cover the cost of operations. And it's just a fact, and it doesn't matter if it's Luma or Florida Power and Light or going back to a PREPA run system. There's a $200+ million deficiency just in terms of being able to manage the grid. And at the same time, we have, as you mentioned, 1.5 gigawatts of distributed solar that's driven in part by the fact that it's in some cases cheaper, and in every case more reliable power than the default grid. And so you already have, and we have had an out-migration phenomenon over the last decade as well. So how do we raise rates to cover costs of operation without further driving people off of the network?
Well, I have to say two things, basically, to what you just said. No, collections that are not enough. I mean, there's a big discussion. No? You know that Luma is saying that collections are not enough. The Energy Bureau is adjusting the rate, taking into consideration the documents that they receive, and that's my understanding that process is being done on an objective and professional way. And what I've seen through the meetings that we have on the Chamber of Commerce on collections is that the collections are aligned with the electricity that was produced and what was billed. And surprisingly, we haven't saw a reduction in the electricity sold compared with the time before Luma, or the time before we had 170,000 net metering or solar customers in the network. So that is something that we as a society and as a Chamber of Commerce, we are requesting Luma, we are requesting the fiscal board, we're requesting the government, we're requesting PREPA, that we want to have this reconciliation of the cash flow of the system to know where the money is going. Because when we see the revenue is not smaller. And the rates are being adjusted by the Energy Bureau, which I believe, and you mentioned it before, I believe that they are doing a technical job that needs to be kept that way. I mean, we shouldn't go back to the moment where we say, well, we don't like that the rates went up, so we don't do it. When we have
which has been the basis of some of the most recent threats against the Energy Bureau, which is
yeah, that's why
the reason is it's bad for me politically.
That's why I'm taking that point that collections are not enough, because in theory the definition of the rate level is a technical definition, and if the billed electricity is close to the collected electricity, that means that if we need more money because we want to do different things, because the owner of the system is in bankruptcy and we need to do capex with short-term cash flow, that's a different decision. But I mean, that will cause probably what you were saying, the need to increase rates to do improvements to the T&D part of the system, that we can't not do it taking debt because PREPA is in bankrupt. Because I don't see the only way out of Puerto Rico to increase rates, because I do believe that T&D needs more money, and when we look at the rate, the 27 cents, you have 6 for T&D and 19 that are for the generation of electricity in different ways, no? And it was amazing what the system have done over the summer, because Genera and P3, and in coordination with Luma, they put in service more than 800 megawatts that were not there in April. And if we would have that, we would have had a very ugly summer. But that generation that came to work over the summer is going to be expensive, and we're going to see that in the next rate reconciliation, because we were running with some generation plants that were not available for many years. So that cost is going to be interesting. But so I would say collections are not enough. We still need, as a society, to be able to speak over objective data, and that data, what the collected amount was used for, we need more transparency, as it was requested by the judge, as it was requested by the Fiscal Reserve Management Board, and as it was requested by the Chamber of Commerce to all the stakeholders. And regarding the customers that are going to renewable systems, I personally believe that yes, it's cheaper if you pay your system and you pay the gridco $4 per month. That is cheaper, yes, but you are inflicting a pressure to the system at a cost that we cannot have. I don't know how to say this in English, sálvese quien pueda. That's what's happening. And yes, it's cheaper for me, but it's not a greater good. It's worse for the system as a whole. So I do believe that we need to find a way of compensating what is needed for the grid to adapt to that new volatility that the renewable system has.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that and this is the ultimate question: good for whom, right? And you made the point that it's not necessarily a greater good; it's very much a zero-sum thinking, and in many ways, it's a rational thought, which is okay. Well, the rest be damned. I'm gonna look out what's best for me, And on the other hand, there's some coordination challenge, which is where a regulator comes in, where political leadership comes in, where utility leadership comes in and says, okay, we're not going to incentivize good for you and bad for us. We're going to make sure that incentives are properly aligned here. I think that there's an interesting, we were talking about Milei's electoral success this past weekend a moment ago. There's a sense that the Laffer curve, which would say you reduce the tax rate and you actually increase tax collections because people are incentivized to grow, and then they have more of a base that you can tax. Does not seem to be either an option or sort of the nonlinear thinking that, or the lateral thinking that would be required to be able to say, okay, we can actually potentially lower rates and get more people to stay on the grid as opposed to continue to incentivize them to defect. The fact that 60+% of the light bill comes from generation-based costs should suggest that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be plucked off of the high-cost tree, so to speak, with regards to reducing that bill. Why haven't you mentioned a pipeline or a natural gas shift away from bunker and diesel? Those seem like relatively straightforward changes that everybody should be pushing for. What's the barrier to making those realities?
In Puerto Rico, 2008 was actually building the pipeline between Peñuelas and Aguirre, and that there was some legal fight, and that gas pipeline that was under construction was stopped and actually was dismantled. And now speaking about pipelines in Puerto Rico is like cursing someone, but technically is the best thing to be done. But I believe that as adjusting the net metering or bringing the ashes to the US because we cannot use them here in Puerto Rico as they are being used in other states in the US, we are allowing non-technical decisions to overrule the best economical and technical decision. So we need to stop. I mean, we need to pay attention to what the general opinion, the community has to say. We need to adjust to what is requested by the community. But we need to take technical decisions for the greater good. And I'm in favor of the energy transition. I've been working with renewable companies in different areas, but we need to see which is the best system or the best solution that is a balance of the different parts to develop the economy of Puerto Rico. And I believe that for doing that, we need to open our way of thinking and paying attention to what's happening in the communities, educate further for people to understand that it's better to have one pipeline than 3 import terminals. It's more economical. It's going to result in lower rates. That's why I say we are not condemned to higher rates, because there are actions that we can do in Puerto Rico with new generation, different infrastructure that can reduce costs. If we are always planning on, okay, we cannot do pipelines, we can not connect San Juan with Palo Seco, and we need to truck, that costs 30% more. The fuel costs 30% more just because we are not doing a pipeline. And technically, we just need to let the engineers design and implement a good system. It's
also the irony of some of the cleaner energy advocates, trucking fuel around the island. Nobody's in favor of more trucks on the road, just from a human perspective, but also it's far dirtier than using a pipeline. This reminds me a little bit of Germany has seemingly doubled down on getting rid of nuclear as part of its portfolio. Some of its final cooling towers were just demolished earlier this month. And Germany now gets to boast that they have the fifth highest electricity rates in the world. And so these are not technical challenges; they're man-made challenges. And in Puerto Rico, we are nobody wants to pay more. Nobody's in the business of making themselves poorer, and yet we routinely kill projects that would make it would shave significant cents off of the top of everybody's bill. So is there an initiative to go back to building a pipeline? Is there, and that's the pipeline side in terms of a fuel shift for the diesel and bunker burning plants?
I
These
mean,
again seem like low-hanging fruits. How do we get them done?
my understanding is that with a different name, which I mean, with a different name, I'm gonna leave it there. With a different name, the San Juan to Palo Seco gas transport system is gonna be executed. I don't know the details, but I heard that it's gonna be renamed, redesigned, so it happens, and I'm happy for that. I mean, we need to find an alternative that follows what the economic greater good is, and take into account what the communities have to say. But if we want lower rates, we need to take technical decisions. And then switching from diesel and bunker to less contaminating and cheaper fuels, there's an RFP that has been open the week before, no, on October 17th. The big question is whether we are going to have a big turnout with the bankrupt utility, no? And I do believe that today the market is operating almost like a free market, no? You have a dispatcher that is the gridco and is calling to generate, and that money, what we were talking before, that money goes to a pot and then it's distributed among to pay fuel and generation. So I don't think we are too, and I know that some technicians are going to say that I'm too simplistic, but I don't think we are too far and really switching the counterpart of the new generation from a bankrupt prepa to a market that could allow us to have bigger success on this new RFP process, you know, where we are now having an RFP where the counterpart is in bankruptcy, and we need to find a way of getting a counterpart that can actually be better graded, that will allow better financing, and in turn that will be lower electricity bills.
Yeah, that's such a fundamental point that I don't think so many people recognize, that the cost of capital is one of the things that drives high cost projects. And we just saw the Energy Bureau open up, and as a result of governor's executive order, to open up an accelerated timeline to reevaluate proponents, or give proponents an opportunity to resubmit bids under a new cost structure and an accelerated timeline. Part of the issue is that those bids were rejected by and large because of cost, and costs have only gone up, and the cost tolerance has gone down. And so what I sort of joke that, the best part about an accelerated timeline is at least we fail quickly. I think one of the key challenges that Puerto Rico faces, and you guys, excuse me, and you guys see this from the chamber's perspective, is businesses have very little trust in the Energy Bureau or LUMA or PREPA or the FOMB or the governor's office to address one of the key challenges they face on operations every day, which is the quality of infrastructure. And we're talking energy, obviously. This is the Puerto Rico Energy Forum after all. But the last week, there was no water for 190,000 paying customers in the metro area. And I went to a restaurant, I won't say which, because we couldn't do dishes at home. And I go to the bathroom and there's no water to wash your hands, which means the chef isn't washing his hands, which means that business shouldn't operate, which means businesses suffer immensely, close,
Well, I mean,
5 days of water can
was
kill a business.
25 cents a gallon before the aqueduct got broken, and when the aqueduct, while it was being repaired, it went up to $1 per gallon, buying bulk, you know. And that's crazy. I mean, if we have a business and we need to run on wholesale water at $1 a gallon, it kills the business.
So we have a credibility challenge because these folks are looking at those suppliers of public goods, and have a hard time having confidence that they can plan for the long term, let alone the middle or short term, with some of the overhead associated with their business. That obviously translates to the investors who are going to come in and say, that's a 400 megawatt plant that we want to build. That's a 100 megawatt solar farm plus BESS that we want to sell to the grid. That's due diligence that we're willing to do in terms of buying the land, doing the study for interconnection, go through the permitting process, which we understand is going to be a challenge, even if we have all the right consultants and team members to help us get through. There's an accelerated process, but you look at what happened to previous tranches of procurement, and there was an RFP issued, and it didn't get executed, or they started getting the pipeline built and ended up dismantling it, or we end up going back to the word you used at the beginning, the execution. So how do we rebuild this credibility, both on the business sector side, the commercial sector, which is the chamber's a key bread and butter, but also on the investor side that's going to say, we have the expertise to build big projects, to contribute to the transition, not necessarily to renewable energy, but to reliable energy. And at the same time, Puerto Rico is not the only market in the world. We're looking at projects. There's going to be a ton of people looking at projects in Jamaica, and our thoughts are with our neighboring island that's getting hit by a historically strong storm. That's going to need to be rebuilt, and going to have access to international aid funds to be able to do so. There's markets throughout the U.S. Some of the distributed projects in the U.S. are 400 megawatts. That's for data centers, and that's what we're trying to build to replace our whole fleet. So how do we build credibility when we have very little, let alone creditability, but credibility is a slow road to build on, and Puerto Rico doesn't exist in a vacuum. We're competing against other places that can get projects done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, for me, and that's what we're doing on the Chamber of Commerce, this is accountability. It's as we were saying, collections doesn't seem to be the problem, but how the money is being distributed seems to be the problem. But we need to stop, if we want to be really following accountability to be able to change the execution cycle. We need to work on hard data. We need to put all the people on the same room, and we need to have the discussions on a technical level. We believe this can be done, and that's why in the Chamber of Commerce we are calling all the different stakeholders of the energy system. We're doing this together with other associations to actually get which is the actual data, which are the actionable items, what are the processes that we need to improve to get things done, because otherwise it's like we need the temporary generation process to be finished. And we cannot continue with processes that are not finished. I'm not saying close, because I believe that this needs to come to an end where you say, okay, these were the bidders, this is the result, and we move forward. We need to show that we can do things, and definitely we can do things. I mean, when you look, there are interested parties trying to invest in Puerto Rico, to supply Puerto Rico, and I am confident that if we, as the private sector, follow on the accountability, follow on the projects and where are they and how are they progressing, we can get things done.
I want to talk about some of those execution priorities here in a second. Before that, I was talking to Stantec about some of the efforts that they are doing from a design standpoint for grid repairs. And we are, I want to get your impression on this, because my sense is that the fact that we have access to so many FEMA funds is actually a handcuff, because FEMA requires you, with some, changes and exceptions to this, to rebuild what was there. And yet we have a system, a grid transmission and distribution system in particular, that is one that you would, if you had to start from scratch, you'd never design what we have. And so we are stuck leveraging an incredible amount of federal dollars to rebuild a system you would never design if you had your option to restart, and is not best suited for the needs of a modern Puerto Rico. Is FEMA a handcuff for what we'd really like to do otherwise?
Well, I think you need to do tango, no? It's really, it's a bless that we had that money. I mean, because if you compare with, I don't know what's going to happen with Jamaica. Hopefully, as you were saying, they don't hit that bad and the destruction is not so brutal. But they don't have a U.S. Congress that will allocate so much money to fix them. So, yes, the FEMA process, when we were seeing how the process was executed on the GENCO and on the GRIDCO, we were seeing differences. Really, they need to get together, and we as a society need to see how to better navigate the FEMA reimbursement process and the appropriation of funds, the approval of projects to execute that. But it's true that the projects that were approved in 2017 and 18, today, 8 years later, that cost way too much, way much more than what was originally designed. And the fact that you need to pay first and get reimbursed with a grid code that is not a concession, it's just an operator, and the owner of the assets is in bankruptcy, and a government that is not full of liquidity, that's a challenge. But I wouldn't call it a handcuff, because I believe it's better to have it than not to have it, because otherwise we will be with the problem of liquidity and without the actual, I mean, yes, things will be more expensive, but no help to rebuild.
I want to get your opinion on a couple of things in sort of a lightning round, but before we do that, can you pick out 1, 2, 3 top order priority execution initiatives that the chamber is pushing for, that are doable, actionable, make a huge difference, small difference, make a measurable impact in terms of the competitiveness of the private sector in Puerto Rico?
Well, what we are pushing is for, as we were saying, for the generation, the new RFP to actually move forward, but trying to optimize the way that is that we get either a government guarantee of a different counterpart, so we can have a lower cost of capital for that process.
This is the 3,000 megawatts of firm power.
Yeah. Then we believe that technical decisions need to be the way we decide, because the fact that the gas pipeline was canceled or is not executed between San Juan and Palo Seco, and we are allowing 30% higher cost on fuel because of that, is more general. I mean, this applies to the ashes that are shipped to the mainland for being used for a use that could be done here. So I would say the second is get the technicals, and I don't know the order, but really we need a more fluent conversation between the GRIDCO, the regulation, the regulator, the P3 authority, and PREPA, because we cannot spend so much time getting clarity on who is right or who is wrong on the liquidity issue. I mean, we are in a very delicate place where we need investors to have clarity that if they build, they're going to be paid, and having all this lack of transparency on liquidity, we need either the fiscal board, which is what we requested at the Chamber of Commerce, or some adult in the room that can actually put them together. And this is, again, it's a technical issue. We need to see this is how much we build, this is how much we collected, this is where the money goes, and if there enough money or not. And that's a technical discussion, and we cannot be in the different courts fighting that what I'm saying is correct and what you're saying is incorrect, and exactly the other way around.
Are you up for a lightning round where I'll throw an idea or a theme out and you tell me one sentence what you think about it?
Yeah, I might say no, but yes.
That's okay. Regional electric companies for Puerto Rico.
Yes.
Okay, is that something that we should work to transition Luma into to have differentiated competitive regional models that don't bottleneck one thing at the top?
Again, I would like to see a cost-benefit analysis to decide that it's better regional than only one, because it's a big utility, but we are a small island. So I would like to know that the aggregation of whatever amount of regional utilities is better than only one, because I don't want to have, let's say, 6 regional utilities. I don't want to have 6 products instead of 1.
Trans-Caribbean transmission connections.
Anything that increases the amount of options that we have, I'm in favor for that.
Demand response and time of use rate-based policies as a solution to liquidity issues at Luma.
As a solution to many things, to a rational use of electricity, but I'm in favor of doing that as soon as possible. As soon as possible. That should be a priority accelerated project, because
what's the barrier to time of use, for instance, being implemented? Is it just smart meters and being able to understand what's happening at the micro level?
That's the answer that I got. That it's in the pipeline, but it's just the replacement of meters for smart meters, which shouldn't take. I'm not an expert, but I believe that
it's possible.
Can be done faster than what we have been told.
Reforming net metering.
Absolutely necessary.
And does that reform put it on pause? Does it change the rate? What does that reform look like?
I believe that it was net metering, as it was created 1-to-1, was needed to jumpstart the industry. So I even lobbied in favor of having net metering maintained, because I believe that it was there for a purpose. But now, with the level of penetration that we have today, we need to adjust it. Most likely, we'll need to grandfather rights to some of the users that are there, but we cannot continue at 30 megawatts per month, 1 kilowatt per kilowatt, as it is today. So I believe we need to adjust. That was supposed to be decided the new net metering law back in 2024, but I believe we need to adjust that, even if it's just for the new customers. But we cannot continue as we are.
Selling PREPA's assets.
I really, that's more of a bondholder question, because they are the owners of the collateral. But really, I don't see that there's much interest in buying those assets.
I don't see much value in the assets, which is why we're, working to leverage all the FEMA funds to replace them in the first place. The federal judge, Laura Taylor Swain, just issued an order that both parties in both bondholders and the FOMB on behalf of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority have to submit a joint status report proposing a discovery schedule for the litigation over the bankruptcy by November 24th. That's a little less than a month away. We've been hearing for years that in so many words, get your act together, guys. You have to come to a solution here. There's this is just the $3.7 billion on the administrative expense claim, let alone on the rest of the debt. Where do all the chips fall?
I mean, I don't have the crystal ball, but
We won't hold you to it.
no. The problem is that we need, since I believe this is going to take longer than it has. I mean, it's going to take at least 12 months to be solved, and we cannot have an RFP process that is pending for 12 months. So we need a solution. That's why I say either the government is the counterpart, the market is the counterpart. But the bankruptcy, unfortunately, has a process that is taking a lot of time, and it's not going to be solved before the end of the year. So we need to find another alternative for the new generation that is the only alternative that we have for a lower electricity rate, because remember, 2/3 of the electricity rate come from generation. So if we want to reduce, we can reduce, because we have a system that in average has a heat rate of 12,000, and new technology will be under 7,000. So we can actually reduce and go from diesel and bunker that are more expensive to other fuels that are less expensive. So there is an opportunity to reduce cost, but we need to have the investors with the proper backing. So the bankruptcy is in the way. I don't think that's going to be solved fast, but we need an alternative solution fast.
In so many other markets where distributed power, and not necessarily on a one-to-one, each individual user has their own individual solution, but places like even Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic that is starting a cooling and heating district for the hotels and resorts on the east side of Hispaniola, where there's a utility in the driver's seat that says, we don't want you to defect from the grid. We're going to make sure you have the right solution. Obviously, the utility in Puerto Rico is not capable of doing that. Is a bondholder created parallel authority that can be your credit-worthy counterpart for these to say, look, we're going to not wait on the bankruptcy proceeding, but we are going to step in and basically deputize this process so that there's a driver's seat, that a driver in charge that can drive these projects forward for industrial microgrids or a community-based microgrids, or areas where otherwise the grid would have higher pressure or fewer clients to compete with. I rent my home. Part of the issue with net metering, and this would be an issue for some of these industrial microgrids, is if you shift clients off of the main grid, you shift costs to people like me or businesses that rent their space. That would change, obviously, if the utilities in the driver's seat driving those projects forward.
I mean, definitely, I believe it's an alternative that we shouldn't be close to understanding the cost benefits of that proposal. If they are willing to be the counterpart and it's a creditworthy counterpart, then it's great for the system, and I'm all ears to that proposal.
So we are optimists at the end of the day here at the Puerto Rico Energy Forum. So I want to end on a high note. Rodrigo, is there a moment in the last year or so, given the fact that we're almost 11 months into 2025, we're closer to 2050 than we are to the year 2000, which is wild to think about. But is there a moment in maybe this year or last year that gave you the most confidence that progress is possible?
Yeah, I actually, we've been having meetings with the Chamber of Commerce, I said, with the different stakeholders of, Luma, Genera, P3, the PREP, and meeting with the technical guys, the engineers in Luma, the engineers in Genera, the commissioners on the PREP, the employees of PREPA and P3, really the technical level that is there in Puerto Rico, actually, I believe, give us hope that we know what needs to be done. And when I look at the situation that the system had in April, when Genera said, I only have 1,700 megawatts available, this is going to be an ugly summer if we don't hire the emergency generation that unfortunately didn't came to be contracted. But they managed to repair all that was available, and we had a summer where there were blackouts, there were electricity, lack of electricity, but we have the highest summer ever in electricity consumption, and that was supplied by good technical people that were able to deliver on the projects that they have at hand. So I can, if looking for the optimism, we have great technical people in Puerto Rico that know what needs to be done.
It's an important point, and amidst all the challenges that we're facing, and there's a lot of them, right? It's not to say that they're not numerous and they're not incredibly deep challenges that we have to figure out our way out of. Our interview with Jesus Intron about the Genera BESS project that is projecting to reduce generation-based outages by 90% immediately upon operation is one of those things where, I think about businesses, I think about me and my family, I think about people who are facing these outages, and it has an incredible cost to their life. That's one of those things that is like, okay.
And definitely, the two things that will stabilize the system, and to some extent, if the cost that has been announced is the one that ends up being in the contract, are the BESS and the emergency generation. Those two things will stabilize the system in the next 2 years in a way that will be day and night. Will be surprising the difference with those two projects. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but those two projects, I mean, the emergency generation and the BESS deployment, that will improve the system dramatically.
Rodrigo, thank you so much for joining us at the Puerto Rico Energy Forum and for your insight. I look forward to, there's some of these conversations that need to take place over a beer or a whiskey and go deeper, but thank you so much for your time and your insights.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for looking for the Chamber of Commerce.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.